right, it looks like folks logging in are slowing down a little bit, so we'll go ahead and introduce everybody, and that'll give folks just a couple more minutes to log on. So thanks for connecting with us today at the Pennsylvania Game Commission. My name is Lori. I'll be managing the session today, and I want to make sure that everybody can hear us. So if you see in your go-to control panel on the right of your screen, there's a questions box. If you can type in there maybe to let me know that you can hear us, that would be fabulous. Nobody can hear us. Ah, Charlie can hear me. Okay, thanks, Charlie. So today we're fortunate to be joined by Game Commission staff members Jeremy Banfield. He is the agency's elk biologist, and also Mandy Marconi. She's a wildlife education specialist in the north central part of the state. The two of them will be talking with us today about a current study that helps determine what Pennsylvania elk prefer to eat, and a little bit about the agency's new virtual learning initiative. We're shooting to keep the session within your lunch hours, so we expect it to last about 20 to 30 minutes with another 10 to 15 minutes for questions. It is being recorded, so everybody will get a link to the recording maybe early next week. You can send us questions by typing in the question box. Some of you have found that, and we will get to those at the end of the webinar. And with that, Jeremy, Mandy, thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything you'd like to share about yourselves or your job before we get started?
Hi, Lori. Thank you for having us, and hello to everyone watching. We are very excited to have you on here. As Lori mentioned, I am the North Central Environmental Education Specialist, and I conduct outreach throughout our North Central region. This presentation is the second episode of our From the Field series, which aims to give you a feel for being in the field with Pennsylvania Game Commission folks, and it's brought to you by Wildlife on Wi-Fi, the Game Commission's virtual learning platform. I'll now turn it over to Jeremy, who will be guiding us through this presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Mandy. Appreciate the introduction. My name is Jeremy Banfield, as everybody has already said. I'm the elk biologist for the Pennsylvania Game Commission. Lori talked about this earlier. We've got roughly 20, maybe 25 minutes of presentation here with time for questions at the end. I am going to do a quick introduction on elk in general, because I'm not exactly sure how many of the viewers are going to know, one, that we have elk in Pennsylvania, and two, just some of the basic nomenclature and the basic terms that we're going to use during this webinar. And also just give you some background on the research project that we're going to be talking about here as we move forward. So really quick, and I know a lot of people are going to know this already, but just in case you don't, we're going to cover it. When we talk about bulls, or excuse me, when we talk about male elk, they're called bulls. They're not bucks like deer. So bulls are males. Spikes would be the 1.5 year age class. They've got kind of this, you know, 16 to 18 inches of just single spike antler coming off of them. Branched bulls is going to be anything that's greater than 2.5 years, and the antlers start to branch out from there. Cows are female elk, so again, they're not does like in deer. It's bulls for males and females are cows. And then calves are young of the year, so it's not bucks, does, and fawns. It is bulls, cows, and calves. For some perspective on differences between elk and deer, you can kind of see these two. This is a young spike bull that's nose to nose with a buck whitetail. And that spike is not even full grown yet, but that gives you some perspective. Roughly 3, maybe 4 times the size of deer. On average, adult cows are going to be roughly 500 pounds, and adult bulls are about 750, 760 pounds. Okay, we do have an elk management area in Pennsylvania, and that is where our current elk population resides and occupies, and where we'd like to see them stay. So It's in the very north central part of the state. It covers all of Cameron County and then pieces of Elk, Clearfield, Center, Clinton, Potter, McKean, Tioga, and Lycoming counties. We did have elk once upon a time in Pennsylvania. So historically, pre-colonial, leading through most of the colonial settlement period, we had elk in Pennsylvania. And a lot of the things that we see nowadays, a lot of the names that we see in our state are kind of a testament to that, if that makes sense. So elk, rivers or streams, Elk Lick Road, Elk Lick Run, there's Elk County, there's Elk State Forest, there's Elk Townships. So, that speaks to that, yeah, once upon a time there were elk in Pennsylvania. And a lot of the things that we still see today are a remnant of that. That said, there was an extirpation event. So if we think about the word extinct, that means completely removed from Earth. And extirpation would be removed from a certain geographic area. So elk were extirpated from Pennsylvania somewhere around the late 1800s. So there's two conflicting accounts. One is 1867, Jim Jacobs. The other one is 1877 and John Decker. And I don't know how anybody could claim, definitively that they killed the last elk in Pennsylvania, but somewhere around, 1880s, the last elk was taken in Pennsylvania and elk were extirpated at that time. Stayed gone for about 30 years, and then in 1913, the Game Commission with other partners reintroduced elk. So the first initial drop-off was 50 animals from Yellowstone National Park, and they were put into Clearfield and Clinton counties. And then there was also animals taken from a private reserve in Monroe County that were dumped out. And then there were additional reintroductions, 1915, and then a few more in 1924 and 1926. Most of our elk came from Yellowstone National Park. Some came from South Dakota, and then again, some came from a private reserve in Monroe County. That population early on appears to have really ballooned out to roughly 200, maybe 250 animals. It's very difficult to say. The accounts and the records at that time frame were scattered, to say the best. But what we do know is that the landscape at that time looked a lot different. So this is during the timber heydays, and elk, the habitat at the time for elk was probably better than it was through the mid part of the century. And so early on, elk probably did do very well. And then as time went on, habitat succession, poaching disease, things like that ultimately led to a decline in the population. And then between 1935 and 1970, there's kind of this dark period where we don't really know how many elk there were. There's different speculative accounts that there were as few as 17, some as few as 25, some are more like 50. The nation's attention was on different things at that time, right? So we had world wars going on, the Great Depression, et cetera. And it just, it wasn't something that was a priority at the time. So somewhere during that time frame, the population dropped low, and then it stayed low for many decades, and then it comes out to basically where we are today, which is roughly 1,300 to 1,400 animals. This is the current data from the past 10 years, and we did do a minimum count up until 2018, and then in 2020, this past year, we switched back to an aerial platform. And you can see the population estimate there. So confidently, I could say that it's between 1,300 and 1,400 currently. All right, switching away from that and moving into habitat management for elk, and really the focus of this study, this research that we're going to talk about. Elk are primarily grazers. That's not to say they won't browse. And that is just some video that you see there. There's a small camera lens in the collar of this animal. So you're looking actually at the back of her chin. And that was just to give you a demonstration of what exactly grazing looks like. But essentially, they're going to be more focused on the herbaceous habitat, meaning grasses, forbs, legumes, and less so on woody browse, which would be shrubs and trees. That's not to say they won't browse, they will, but for the most part, if grass is available, that's what elk are going to key in on. So obviously they are herbivores, and their dentition is adapted for that. So all of these back molars here are made for crushing up vegetation, and then they have a 4-chamber stomach, which ultimately ferments it, and very similar to a cow. That's how they can process plant material that, for example, the human body cannot. Now, one of the primary questions that we've kind of been looking at over the years, or thinking about over the years, is what specifically are elk interested in when it comes to herbaceous. So again, I'm going to separate herbaceous from woody by saying that anything that's herbaceous is the stuff that dies back on an annual basis. So grasses, forbs, wildflowers, legumes, clovers, all of that stuff is going to be herbaceous. And then woody shrubs or young trees or mature trees, that's all kind of that woody component. So again, elk are going to be mostly focused on the herbaceous part, and then what ultimately we came down to is what specific species can we plant to best meet an elk's needs throughout the growing cycle. And that is where we came into our current research project, and I will play a video that is going to describe most of that, and then afterward we can jump in for questions.
Hey, good morning, folks. Welcome back to another episode of From the Field. My name is Jeremy Banfield. I'm the elk biologist with the Pennsylvania Game Commission. So this is one of our research sites, and what we've got going on here is in this field there are 12 different species of forage or plant, basically, that elk are going to be choosing from, right? So we've got a buffet style selection is what we call it. 12 different species, each one is 150 by 50 feet, so they're planted in strips. And really the goal here is elk are grazers, primarily. That's not to say that they won't browse, but 9 times out of 10, if grass or some kind of herbaceous habitat is available, that's really what they're going to be keying in on. And so the goal of this is to understand what specific species do elk prefer, right? What do they select when they're given all of these different options here? And ultimately what we're going to use that for is improving our habitat management, improving the efficiency, and really the effectiveness of it overall. So right here we're going to put in a little bit of drone footage just so you can see what this looks like from the air. All right, so let's go take a closer look here. So this plot has sweet clover in it, and you can see this exclosure behind me. The idea behind this is that we're actually keeping the animals out of this area, and that's so we can measure how much they're consuming, right? So if they're able to forage on all of this, in theory this is going to be lower in height, and everything inside the exclosure is going to be higher. So we've got Michaela and Sam in one of our meadow fescue plots right now, and they're taking an actual clipping of the vegetation. They've got it already pre-marked with the flag. We drop down a PVC square or a frame, and then we just clip everything in it, and that keeps it uniform from site to site, from place to place.
This one and one more.
Oh, sweet, awesome. All right, that is going fast then. So now they're actually getting a sample from inside the exclosure, and the point here, the goal I should say, is really to understand what amount the elk are eating. So we'll take the dry weight from the clipping from inside the exclosure and just compare it to the dry weight of the clipping from outside the exclosure. So the dry weight is just, I mean, that forage sample obviously has a lot of moisture in it, and it'll get put into an oven first. They dry it to a uniform moisture content, and so you truly know how much forage is actually there because all the water's been removed. Okay, and this will be done 4 times per year during the growing season, so during the summer months, starting late spring, a couple more times during the summer, and then a final time at the end of basically right around October. Okay, so here, in order to measure the amount of time that elk are spending in each one of these, we're actually going to be using trail cameras, right? So on every one of these plots is a telephone pole, and then there's a trail camera strapped to that. And what we'll get in the end is the actual relative proportion of time that elk spend in each one of these.
Just jumping in here again, what you're seeing is that camera is looking down the strip, so you can see the exclosures, you can see the lighter green here, that's the edges of the strip itself, and then any elk that are inside there are being detected and photos clipped, or excuse me, photos captured from the trail camera there. Lori, are you still there?
I am. Do you maybe need to restart the video? The play on the video? Not restart it, but just hit the play button.
Yeah, nothing is working at all at the moment. Can you try grabbing control one more time and just see if that changes anything?
I can. Looks like
Hey, good morning, folks. Welcome back to another episode of From the Field. My name is Jeremy Banfield. I'm the elk biologist with the Pennsylvania Game Commission. So this is one of our research sites, and what we've got going on here is in this field there are 12 different species of forage or plant, basically, that elk are going to be choosing from, right? So we've got a buffet style selection is what we call it. 12 different species, each one is 150 by 50 feet, so they're planted in strips. And really the goal here is elk are grazers, primarily. That's not to say that they won't browse, but 9 times out of 10, if grass or some kind of herbaceous habitat is available, that's really what they're going to be keying in on. And so the goal of this is to understand what specific species do elk prefer, right? What do they select when they're given all of these different options here? And ultimately, what we're going to use that for is improving our habitat management, improving the efficiency, and really the effectiveness of it overall. So right here, we're going to put in a little bit of drone footage just so you can see what this looks like from the air.
I wish I could fast forward through this part a little bit, but I don't.
All right, so let's go take a closer look here. So this plot has sweet clover in it, and you can see this exclosure behind me. The idea behind this is that we're actually keeping the animals out of this area, and that's so we can measure how much they're consuming, right? So if they're able to forage on all of this, in theory this is going to be lower in height, and everything inside the exclosure is going to be higher. So we've got Michaela and Sam in one of our meadow fescue plots right now, and they're taking an actual clipping of the vegetation. They've got it already pre-marked with the flag. We drop down a PVC square or a frame, and then we just clip everything in it, and that keeps it uniform from site to site, from place to place.
This one and one more.
Oh, sweet, awesome. All right, that is going fast then.
In the cooler.
So now they're actually getting a sample from inside the exclosure. And the point here, the goal I should say, is really to understand what amount the elk are eating. So we'll take the dry weight from the clipping from inside the exclosure and just compare it to the dry weight of the clipping from outside the exclosure. So the dry weight is just, I mean, that forage sample obviously has a lot of moisture in it, and it'll get put into an oven first. They dry it to a uniform moisture content, and so you truly know how much forage is actually there because all the water's been removed. Okay, and this will be done 4 times per year during the growing season, so during the summer months, starting late spring, a couple more times during the summer, and then a final time at the end of basically right around October. Okay, so here, in order to measure the amount of time that elk are spending in each one of these, we're actually going to be using trail cameras, right? So on every one of these plots is a telephone pole, and then there's a trail camera strapped to that. And what we'll get in the end is the actual relative proportion of time that elk spend in each one of these.
Back to our original spot here, sorry about that. Just supposed to describe and demonstrate how the trail camera is looking down each plot and some of the example footage that you get. You can see all the exclosures there. And
so in addition to the cameras monitoring the time that elk are spending in each one, the clippings, we also do take a soil sample. And the idea here is that it just allows us to make sure that everything's as uniform as possible across the board. And all of the micronutrients, the pH, everything's the same. So this is a 3-year study. We're in year 1 of it right now. And I talked earlier about how we're doing clippings 4 times per year. The reason that we're doing 4 clippings per year is the nutritional quality changes throughout the year, right? So on one species, it might mature faster than another species. And elk figure that out, right? I mean, they're going to know that the quality of species A might be better than species B early on, but it might shift the complete opposite later on in the season. So that's really the point between doing the 4 clippings per year and having those cameras out there the whole time. Gives us that extra data point as well. So really the main focus of this is during the growing season, and the ultimate purpose is to really refine our habitat management. So most of our forage openings, or these herbaceous openings as we call them, they're planted and maybe every 3 to 5 years. So we don't do it every year. It would just be too much effort, but we do try and come back through and replant on like a 3 to 5 year rotation. So really the goal is to understand, what do we plant, right? What species can we plant that will best serve the needs of our elk throughout the growing season? So while we've got all these in single monocultures, ultimately we're going to try and mix them and create an ideal mix that will create the perfect habitat for elk year round. So one thing that I haven't talked about yet is the partnerships that come along with this, right? This is a Game Commission project for Game Commission management, obviously, but we pulled in a lot of partners to help us along the way.
Good morning, folks. My name is Doug Herring. I work for Waypoint Analytical. Waypoint is providing testing services for the plots here, testing the forages, for them to help find what the elk prefer to eat and when they prefer to eat it. Thank you very much.
Well, hello there. My name is Dodie McDowell. I'm the Habitat Manager and the Field Director for the Keystone Elk Country Alliance.
And I'm Christy Reinecker, and I am the Eastern Field Director for the Keystone Elk Country Alliance.
Keystone Elk Country Alliance is extremely proud and honored to be a part of this project. You know, we've been talking a lot about what elk eat, and everybody seems to know what elk eat, but nobody really knows what they prefer. So when Jeremy brought this project to us at the Keystone Elk Country Alliance, we were thrilled to be a part of it. And our role here is simply, you know, a little bit of facilitation of some of the partnerships. We also reached out to a local company, Bow Creek Outfitters, and which is Pennsylvania based, and we were able to purchase all the cameras that Jeremy's using for the project.
I'm Chris McCracken. I'm with Local Seed Company, a regional seed company here out of Pennsylvania. We also have facilities all through the Mid-South and the eastern U.S. I'm in charge of all small seeds within the company, which means cover crops, wildlife, turf, and forages. We have, as Local Seed Company, we've donated a lot of seed here for these plots and for this study, and we're very, very excited to be working alongside this group.
It's really neat that we get to pull all those different partners in, and I should say on behalf of the Game Commission, thank you to them. Hey folks, thanks so much for joining us on this episode of From the Field. Hopefully you did get to learn something here, at least see how we use research to improve our management practices, specifically for elk habitat. Moving forward, this project will go on for another 3 years, and you can look for those results at that time. But if you have any questions right now, we can answer them.
All right, so we have a couple questions already, and if you have some questions, go ahead and type them into the questions box in the right on your go-to panel. Let's see, our first question here is from Peter, and he asks, why elk from Yellowstone instead of, say, Roosevelt elk on the West Coast?
Yep, good question. So early in the part of the century, 1920s, 1910s and 1920s, Yellowstone was seeing massive die-offs from presumably overpopulation at that time. I don't know if it's completely clear. Again, it's tough to judge things that happened over 100 years ago, but they were anxious to ship elk to different parts. So at that time, Yellowstone was acting as the source for many different populations throughout the U.S., and they were shipping elk everywhere. So it was probably just an availability thing, right? Like Yellowstone is willing to give up elk, and they needed places to put them, and Pennsylvania at the time was like, yeah, we'll take some. So I mean, it was really just an opportunity and availability that was with Yellowstone versus the Roosies on the coast or something like that.
That's great. Folks can also view a 20-minute documentary on the reintroduction of elk in Pennsylvania if you go to the Game Commission's website and check that out on the elk webpage there. All right, we have another question here. Would elk at different ages potentially prefer different forage based on nutrient needs at different ages?
Yes, and gender as well, or sex, I should say. So bulls are going to have a unique requirement in terms of forage when they are growing and developing antlers. As they move into the rut, they almost hardly eat at all, but then after the rut, they have to build back up fat reserves. So yeah, it changes seasonally by the sex of the animal, by the age. Same for cows. They're going to have a unique set of things that they're going to be after when they're lactating, when they're trying to nurse calves, and through gestation as well. So all of that will probably, or at least somewhat, be revealed during this. I mean, we know that we're going to see different species mature at different times and probably be preferred at different times. And hopefully of those 12 species that are planted out there, maybe 3 to 5 kind of float to the top, and then you're going to see a change in when they're used and when they're not used. But again, the idea is that we can put these all into a mix and make it a one-stop shop essentially for elk.
Awesome. Is there cooperation from other states that are introducing elk, such as Kentucky, West Virginia?
No, they're not cooperating directly with us. They're very interested to see what happens here as well. And they may end up adapting that or using that similar seed mix. There's subtle variation between Pennsylvania's climate and habitat compared to some of the eastern states. In general, the eastern United States is roughly the same, the eastern deciduous forest, but the results of this could be used by the other states either in a foundational aspect where they might adapt it, or just, they might just take our results directly and apply it to their elk populations. But there's no direct collaboration with some of the other states. They are aware we're doing it. you know, we communicate with them fairly regularly, but nobody else has got plots and sites out there and is taking data.
Great. Does Pennsylvania have any plans to introduce elk into other parts of the state?
Another good question. Heard it before a few times. Currently, no. So I talked a little bit about our elk management area earlier, and that's where we'd like to see elk stay. By design, that area was picked because it is greater than 70% public land and it has a very low proportion of agriculture. So in general, it's trying to keep elk out of trouble and keep them in areas where they're going to be less likely to come into conflict with people. In that current elk management area, we're only about 2/3 occupied, so there's room to grow, especially to the north and the east. And so the answer right now is no, we're not looking at anywhere else in the state because, you know, we've got an area designated for some very specific and important reasons, and there's still room to expand within that spot.
All right. I don't have any other questions at the moment. Oh, wait, here comes one. From your surveys and elk hunt studies since 2000, what has been the effect of the average age on the herd?
Okay, I'm not quite sure I understand. What is, say it one more time. What's the effect on the average age of the birth?
Of the, it looks like maybe the question is about how the hunt has affected the average age of the elk herd.
Of the herd. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. I think you said birth, not herd. Yes. Okay. A bull will on average live roughly 10 to 12 years. And cows are going to be anywhere from like 15 to 19. Once a cow reaches roughly 15 years of age, she's no longer productive, meaning she's less likely to conceive and carry a calf to full term and be, you know, contributing to the population. So the part of the reason that we have a harvest is to try and keep that age structure in its most productive years. Average age of bulls right now is about 7, and average age of cows is about 12. So that's being effective. It is, you know, there's still animals that are outside those regions and older than that. But on the grand scale, they're kind of the exception to the rule rather than the rule. So the hunt is benefiting our age class and doing what it's designed to do.
All right. I don't see any other questions popping up, but I have a question that folks might be interested in. By mid-September, we plan to have the live elk stream up and running, which is at on a part of game lands up there in the North Central. And I know that area was planted. So what do you know what was planted there where the elk that we're going to see on the live stream are eating?
Yep, that would have been a mixture of basically a brassica mixture, which is like kale and rape and different broadleaf forbs that typically come up in the fall. And I mean, that's purposeful. We're trying to pull those animals in so that they can be on camera and be available for people to enjoy with that. But the short answer is a brassica mixture.
Perfect. Thanks. So I don't see any other questions coming in. Mandy, is there anything you wanted to add here at the end?
Hi, the only thing that I'd like to add in is if you're looking for some more virtual learning, to check out our virtual learning page on our Game Commission website at pgc.pa.gov.
Thanks. All right, so as I told you before, the session has been recorded. So probably early next week, maybe over the weekend, you'll get an email with the link to the recording. The recording will also then be uploaded to the Game Commission's YouTube channel. I'd like to thank Jeremy and Mandy for sharing their experience and their time with us today. We'd also like to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us this afternoon. And we hope that you'll visit us again to learn more about Pennsylvania wildlife in upcoming webinars. If there's a particular subject you're interested in, let us know. And until then, we hope you're able to get outside and enjoy some of Pennsylvania's great outdoors. Thanks so much, everybody. Be well, stay safe.